Hi, I'm Leonard Geddes. You may recall in the last video segment featured a group of students who participated in the Transforming Good Students into Great Learners workshop. That experience was captured in the spring of 2012. In that video, the purpose was to pimp it out for students so that other students would see what their peers were doing and the dramatic academic improvements they were having both in their learning and also in their grades. Well, in this next segment, it's going to be a little different. I'm going to invite you in on a conversation between three students that I encountered in various ways. One of the students participated in a fall 2012 Transforming Good Students into Great Learners four-part session by actually physically participating in the session. Another student actually participated in that same session, but due to conflicts, he was unable to attend, so he watched the videos, which were posted after each segment. And then a third student I got to know because I did an academic and athletic combined workshop for his athletic team. And then we translated the learning that had been going on in athletics and used that as a model to help him transfer those skills over to academics. So I invite you to listen in on our conversation.
I'm Rodney. I am a junior here and my major is biology. I applied this to organic chemistry and physics. On my first organic chemistry class, I had a 59.5. And on my final test, I had a 85. And then I applied to physics 2. And my first physics test, I did terrible. I got 49. But then on my last test, I got 85.
So you went from on your first test in chemistry from a
59.5 to a 85.
And then on your physics test, you went from a 49
to a 85 too.
85.
85.
85 as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Which were both B's?
In organic chemistry, 85 is the A.
Is an A? Okay. Yeah, that's a tough course. That's one of our.
Yeah, so you're on a 15 scale.
Yeah, I think that's one of our courses we have the most tutor apply for, most tutor applications for tutor requests, I should say, and we also have the most students who struggle, withdraw, or fail that course.
It's a hard class.
Yeah.
I'm Brian Howell. I applied this to med surg. I'm a nursing major. My first test I made a 74 on, and then my last test, which just completed about a week ago, it ended up being a 92.7 was my final grade.
Yeah,
so.
It's a big jump.
Oh yes.
And that med surg course
it's
a beast.
Yes, it is. It's very hard.
I've had to console a number of students who cried about that course over the years. And that's one of the ones that make people consider their major, make you want to change your major.
It does.
So, is that typical for students to make that type of jump in that class?
No. Usually, if you make an 80 on a med surg test, you consider it pretty good.
Yeah. You start jumping.
Oh yeah, that's the highest test I've ever made on a med surg test.
Yeah.
My name's Nick. I'm an IT major. I applied this to CSE 141. My first couple tests were 45s and 50s, and my previous test was a 90.
45, 50, then to a 90.
Big increase.
Yeah. And you're a first-year student, right?
Yeah, freshman.
So how was that as a freshman, first semester? You get those tests, you're making 40s. How did that feel?
It's a big adjustment.
Yeah. Were you successful in high school?
Yes.
So when you came to college, you assumed you would continue to be successful.
It's a big change.
Yeah. Did you work harder coming to college? Did you know college was going to be harder than high school?
My studying techniques weren't working for me here.
Okay.
And that's why I did this program.
And you had some success. So how does it feel now to go from a 40-something to a 90?
Feels good.
Now exams are coming up. You feel a little bit more confident. Mom's happy? So how did that conversation go when you called her?
Pretty well. I get yelled at.
Did you expect, when taking the test, did you expect to do that well, or was that a surprise to you?
Not really a surprise because I felt more comfortable.
Okay. Talk about that for a minute. What do you mean?
I wasn't puzzled during the test. I didn't have to think about things. It was more like I knew what it was. I knew what the question was asking. and I was able to take what I learned and then turn it into an answer depending on the question, compared to being puzzled and not even knowing what to do.
So what's different about how you prepared for the test and how you sort of confirmed what you learned before the test, from before and now, that resulted in you performing so well?
I like to get a different point of view on things. Instead of just knowing one thing, being able to apply it to many different things, and have like a bigger outlook on it.
Okay. What about you with tests? Any difference? Or?
Oh yeah, when I first was take my med search test, I'd be like, oh man, I'm one of the last ones in here. I can't get it. I can't get it. It was just taking me forever to sit there and just try to rationalize through the answers. And then on my last test, I was one of the first ones finished, and I was like, something ain't right.
Could be good or bad, right?
Just something ain't right. I flew through this, and I ain't supposed to be going this fast. And when I left out there, I just had a sense of I was just calm. I mean, I knew that deep in my mind, I knew I did pretty good on it, but I still was questioning myself, am I supposed to finish this fast? Was it too easy, or I just didn't, was it too easy, or I just kind of just seen this answer and just guessed on it?
Yeah.
I just flew through it. That kind of scared me just a little bit.
Yeah, it seems like your history was saying, you're supposed to be struggling. Like, you usually struggle with this, and now your reality is saying, well, man, I did pretty well on this. I'm reading through these questions, and I'm actually getting this stuff.
I was like him. I was going, my first test, I was more on trying to memorize stuff. And now with my tests, I was, the day after, we have a test, we start new material the following day. Well, I'm already started on that new material, and I just do a little bit at a time and, just pretty much stay with her in class. And when I was reading, I would usually start reading the first page of that chapter and read the whole chapter, 2 and 3 times.
So this is before.
Yeah, this is
before the session.
Yeah.
You would start reading at the chapter 1, and you read it all the way through, or whatever chapters you needed to read.
I'd read it from the first page of that chapter to the end of that chapter. And now, the way I do it is, the first 5 or 6 pages, I call it the fluff of the chapter. I just, thumb through it. And now I just pretty much, I hit on the concepts of what's going on in the chapter, what am I supposed to be learning, and I ask myself these questions here, what's happening, why is it happening, how's it happening, what's the consequences of it, as a nurse, what am I supposed to do to remedy this or to assess this problem?
Yeah.
So.
You? Hey. Any change in how early you study or anything, or?
I've always been one to try and pay attention in class, and sometimes I get lost. Compared to now, I try and look at what she's doing and try and work it out at the same time and manage between the two. The whole reading the chapters thing was not working out for me until I found a little review section in the back of the book, and surprisingly that helps.
Yeah.
Doing a review section in the back.
I think we talked about that in our session about how to use the textbook as a navigation system to be able to guide. Did that help you at all? That textbook navigation
to
part?
Read what your learning outcomes at the first of the chapter, and then you go through the chapter, you hit those learning outcomes, and if you find yourself at the end of the chapter and you go back, for me, I would look at my learning outcomes, I would read what I thought was the pertinent information, and then I would go back and I would say, okay, well, here's my learning outcome. Did I get this out of this? And if I didn't, I would go back. I'd go back and hunt it down and make sure that I got that concept.
Rodney, any difference?
For my 2 classes, organic chemistry and physics, we didn't really need a book. We haven't used the book yet, but it basically going through her notes and how you post her notes that she give us, because the notes got all the concepts that we actually need to know on it, and basically to go through the notes a good bit of times and read through that, because each chapter is broken up in the note, and then each of those are broken up like different sections in the note chapters. And then organic chemistry, the book thing, we basically use the book for like to doing all our homework. But before the sessions, I never like really used the book on organic except for to do the homework. But then when I do the homework, I go through the chapters. I go to the chapter now. I like at least go through it, because a lot of the stuff in organic is like mechanisms and know like which thing to react with what to get something. Like one chapter you had like 20 different mechanisms in just one chapter that we had to learn, and it's just because so much, and sometimes you don't get the right stuff in class. You need to go through the book and look what the book have, because the book might have something a little bit different, but it help fill in the gap that you're missing from class.
Yeah, on that note, there's this concept that I use called outcome variation, where students typically, in my experience, when they come in and they have something like chemistry or nursing or CSC, where they have all these different terms, they measure their learning by how many terms they know, by the quantity of information they can remember in their head, and their sense of I got itness goes off, and they sort of confirm their learning by the quantity of things that they accumulate. One of the things that we talked about in this session was switching from the quantity of surface-based, remember that term, we use surface-based information, to deepening your knowledge of that information, so that you don't just necessarily have a lot of surface information. You may have less concepts, but you know those concepts deeply, meaning that you can not just define the concept, but you can evaluate that concept, or you can distinguish those concepts one from another. Talk about that and how that may have played a role, if any, in your evolution here.
For me, I basically do what you said. I said, remember all the time I know that I can go to the test half the time. I said, I know all these terms I'm going to get. I go there, and I might find a few of the terms I know, then other stuff that is derived from the terms. And that's the stuff that I wouldn't know before. Like, the big thing in organic chemistry was, like, my first test, I knew the stuff, like, on, like, surface level, and I study it, and I get to the test, and I understand stuff. But my professor Dr. Ring, he's like us, not such another debate, but he go in depth and actually make it think about everything, about why this happening and what are the reasons. So when I approach studying now, when I do something, I look over the surface, but then I ask myself questions of why this happening, what would happen if you use something else instead of this, or this what they want. They give you like the product. Why is this a product, and what could I have to start off with to get this product? So I start to look at everything deeper and ask my question, why this is happening, or what if something else happened?
Which, that is very much what we talked about in the session. That's metacognition. It's that ability to know, a large part of it is that ability to know, to encode what I need to know, to decipher what I need to know, what I know now, where I am along that continuum. And then more importantly, that many students struggle with over the years, in my experience, is how do I know that I'm there? Like, how do I avoid being that student who studies, gets all these confirmations while I'm studying, believe that that's going to help me on the test, and then go to the test and be like, oh my gosh, like, did I even study the right stuff, right? So that change in that confirmation system, I saw you nodding your head. Yeah. What's your experience with that?
Well, I mean, for nursing, it was all, from day one that I stepped on this campus and I was in the nursing program, it was all about, nursing's all about critical thinking. Well, me being older, I was more like, okay, well, it's just critical thinking. I can go on memorization, I can memorize this stuff and blah. It just didn't work for nursing. And when I went into this program and I started, you taught us about the ask the why questions, what's happening, why is it happening? That right there made me start thinking more critically. It made me start, when I would see, I'd see a question on a test, I'd be like, okay, why is this happening? What's happening? Why is this happening? What's the outcome if this happens? It made me think deeper.
Any comments from you on that, or?
Not really much, but as far as like the CSC class, I take time in the library and I'll go on a computer and I'll just experiment with the different codings and try and see if there's different outcomes on just one variable instead of, I know it has one meaning to it, but when you actually play around with it, there's more than one meaning. And there's more stuff that you can do with it. It's just a lot of experimental type stuff.
Yeah, so it sounds like if you look at this diagram, you're down in the, before you might have been trying to memorize the different functions, and now you're kind of applying them, and you realize that different functions or different applications may have different outcomes.
Right, I try and get down to the creating part.
And do you know when you've gotten down there?
Yes.
That's good. That's very important. And you didn't participate. We kind of came to know each other through a presentation I did to the soccer team, which you're a member of, and then afterwards, your coach kind of said that we need to get together maybe because you were struggling in this course, and in the session I tried to take what I'll call athletic literacy, and translate that into academic literacy because, of course, being a collegiate athlete, you're very literate in playing your sport. You know soccer. And we worked through the diagram, you might recall, and was able to apply the different types of thinking and the depths of those thinkings that occur in soccer. We applied that to the academic world so that you would have that sort of sports model to play upon. I remember when I said that you won't remember everything I talk about, but you'll remember how you'll be able to take your soccer experience and be able to remember those thinking and those components in there and apply it to academics. How did that play out in your experience at all?
Like when we talked about the formation of a 4-2-2. Instead of just knowing it's a 4-2-2 and understanding that a 4-2-2 is 4 defenders, 2 midfielders, two strikers, and 2 wingers, you would know that one's left, one's right, center, you have your 2 strikers up top, but that's not enough compared to knowing how they're going to move, who's going to defend, who's going to attack, and plus you have to think about that all throughout the ball. Try and apply that to your learning.
Yeah, so just so y'all know, I don't know soccer that well. I do this a lot with football and with basketball, and he was educating me on how to do this with soccer. So we talked about how on the first basic level, remembering is kind of that what-based question, and you know what a 4-1-4-2-4, what is it?
4-2-2.
4-2-2. Yeah, knowing what that is, and then being able to understand why that's important and why you would use that. And then he helped me be able to then apply that to actual game. And then we actually got down to these deeper levels of how to analyze, what the defender might be doing, what you might be doing, and how to evaluate those situations, and how the whole thing is how in athletics there's a level of thinking, and in athletics coaches always talk about players playing fast. Unfortunately, we always say thinking is wrong in athletics, and actually there's some research that says that's actually incorrect. That thinking is actually powerful in athletics, and it's the ability to evaluate the situation around you very quickly and efficiently is what makes players play fast. In the same way, in a classroom setting, you have a textbook, you have this classroom, this class that you're going to, and all this way that you're interacting with the material. The successful student can evaluate that information and be able to pull out what's most important, which I believe has led to your success in class. Speaking of class, how has your participation, or has your participation in class changed, and how you kind of view the classroom setting, your state of mind in class? Has that been any different or anything?
Try and ask more questions.
So you're more active, probably, because you're asking more questions?
Same here, I ask questions. Like, when I first got here, I guess I was, intimidated by the college setting. I didn't, high school, I always ask questions all the time. Once I got here, I stopped asking questions. And I didn't even, talk to the teacher. If I had been confused, I should have said, well, I can try to figure it out myself. But I take the sessions and realize that I'm not going to always have, the teacher's not always going to explain everything to me, in depth in class, because they got to be able to explain the whole concept to a whole to everybody. So I ask questions if I don't know anything in class, and then try to understand afterwards why this is happening, or why that's so. When I go to studying, if I don't know something, at least I know more than what I knew before by asking the question, so I'm able to approach it a little bit better and understand it better.
Sounds like there's two things that are coming out. One is, you might remember the 80-20-20-80 rule, about how 20% of what you need to know is going to come from the professor. 80% is what you're going to do on your own. You're going to build upon that information outside of class. Sounds like you all have learned better how to independently learn the information on your own, so that when you come to class is not the main source of your learning, but it's a part, and you're doing more outside. Does that sound accurate?
That's basically how I do. And in class for me, I've got my laptop, and I don't sit and run off a bunch of PowerPoints and all that. I just download it, and on that PowerPoint, I will put, instead of sitting there trying to listen and take notes and all that, I'll have my book open, and I'll just put the page number where that is on in the book. So when I get home and I go back to refresh it, then I'll be like, okay, well, this PowerPoint goes with such, say, page 487. Then I can sit there, read 487, and get more out of it, instead of sitting there trying in class to jot down notes and listen to her, and that's how I do it in class now. It makes sense, because I figured out there's no way that I can take notes and listen to her, because I'm going to miss something somewhere. Yeah. So my thing now is I listen to her. If she keys in on a key point, I make sure it's right there in the book. I'll just take a highlighter or something, and I'll just highlight it right there. So there'd be a thing to myself, okay, this was a key point. I need to focus on this and go deeper into this.
Now, I'm going to pause you right there, because you mentioned, because I think many students will get to the point to where if a professor mentions something in class, they'll get that cue, this is important. And you mentioned that you now learn that deeper. Talk about that. What do you mean by deeper? How do you know that it's deeper? And more importantly, when you're in the moment of learning the material, what's different about when you confirm your learning?
I've noticed that, let's take for med-surg, when she would focus on something, and I would notice it in the book, it would either be, it had to be pretty important, because it was either in italics or it was bolded.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, well, this is pretty important. So
now let me pause. So before our time together, what would you do with that information? Because you would notice that before, right?
I've noticed it before, but I'd be like, well, it's just one of the key features of this problem. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. But now I noticed that, that was either it was the key feature, or it's leading up to something else. You're going to have this problem in order for this one to happen. So we need to focus focus your care on this problem. So I would read that or notice that problem, and then I would research it deeper. If I didn't understand it, in a book, everything, one paragraph builds up on another paragraph, and then I would, if I had to, I would backtrack and say, okay, well, I didn't understand this. I would backtrack and try to figure it out myself. And if I exhausted all of my options, then I would go to the professor and ask, hey, can you explain this a little deeper for me? I'm this far, but I'm right at the edge. I just can't make that jump over to figure out exactly what it is.
Yeah, so that's really valuable, because that's the concept of metacognition and cognitive monitoring, and that's kind of metacognition, thinking about your thinking, and then the monitoring is kind of being able to monitor and regulate, knowing where you are along that continuum. It sounds like you're much more attuned to what you know, what you don't know, and then when there's a gap between what you know and what you are going to need to know.
Exactly.
Any of you want to comment on that at all?
I changed the way I take notes in class too. Like he said before, when teachers speak in class, I also write down everything they say, and so I look up and write down the whole time, make sure I don't miss it. I'm trying to pay attention. But now, organic chemistry, actually I take less notes than I did before, because I act like somebody asking, so I sit there and watch him work through a mechanism problem, and I watch and pay attention the whole time while he do that. And then afterward, after I see everything and understand everything he did, then I'll write down the mechanism and write down all the steps to it afterwards. So I already know when I'm doing it, and then if I look back through my notes, it showing a bunch of letters no more. I actually understand what went on with it, and I can think, why am I getting this wrong? I had the answer there, because I wrote that down last, but I actually knew what was going on during the answer, so I can figure out what I'm doing wrong while I'm doing it.
I've noticed, myself taking notes, I would have our med surg, she's nice enough to give us a test map. Before this, I would take my test map and, my test study guide would be 30 pages long. I mean, I was writing a miniature book here. And now my test map, if it's more than 6 pages long, then I'm thinking it's too long now. Because before I was writing down everything. I was trying to put everything. And now I'm just, with every concept I would ask, okay, like I said, what's happening? Why is it happening? And I would just put the important information, not the fluff that,
Yeah, so being able to distinguish.
Exactly.
So let me get this. So both of you are are recording less notes, but yet learning more.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that is, and what I would say is what you're doing is, if we look at the diagram, you're being able, see, many students, they read the stuff, but they don't really evaluate. They don't make judgments about what's important, what's less important. And that's a very powerful tool. And when you're in college and you have so much information in a variety of classes, you have to have a way of evaluating and discerning the more salient information from, as you call it, the fluff information. And oftentimes, as you all know, and you know this all the time, because I think we first encountered each other in the academic setting, because I've known him for years, and I've seen him like a lot of nursing students who just are struggling, where they have the weight of the world on them, who are struggling. And correct me if I'm wrong, weren't you with a couple of students, you all were studying in the Learning Commons, which my office is located in there, and I came over and I listened to you all study.
Yeah.
And I said, you mind if I just listen to you all study? And they were like, you probably were thinking, like, this guy's weird. We're talking about listening to his study. And what I was doing, and I do this quite frequently, is I listen to students study, and I'm trying to listen to their conversation and how they interact with the material, and I'm rating where they are here in their conversation. And I know that in rigorous course, typically students are going to be tested down here. And I think what I pointed out in that session was that much of the conversation you all were having and much of the notes at that time was very surface-based. Talk about that experience and kind of where you are now, because that was, what, 2 years ago?
That was 2 years ago, yeah. We were just getting started, in nursing school, and we were trying to go on memorization. We didn't care.
Notes like this.
Yeah, notes like this. We didn't care what, why this was happening or what was causing this. We were just wanting, okay, let's memorize this stuff. Let's memorize it so we could regurgitate it back on the test. And now, like I said, I'm way down here, and now I can have a concept, and like I said, I can tell you why, why it's happening, what precipitates it, going after it, of, what kind of remedies you do to fix this problem. And it makes a big difference. I mean, I feel a whole lot better. This time last year in exams, I was sweating. I was like, oh, man, I got to study. I got to study every day. I got to study. And I spoke to some other nursing students today, and it's hard for me to get motivated right now.
Hard for you to get motivated? Why is that?
It's because I can make a 40 on my med-surg final exam and still pass the course.
So before, while you were struggling to make the grade to be able to pass the course, now you have what do you call it? A cushion.
A cushion, yeah.
You have an academic cushion, where you can underperform and still.
I sat there and I did the calculation for my grade. I've done it like 5 or 6 times. I even had my wife to do it.
To make sure this is right.
Yeah, and I didn't want to seem. Stupid. I was about to go to my professor and say, okay, am I figuring this right? Am I figuring this right? But it's a good sense to know that I can make that little on an exam, but I kind of wish I hadn't have figured it now, so I can still have the motivation to keep going on. But I'll find it over the weekend.
You mentioned that both of you mentioned that you study earlier now. I'm curious, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did you start studying earlier, and then, as a result of studying earlier, you began to develop the deeper levels of thinking, or did you start did you start noticing the deeper levels of thinking, and then subsequently realize that you need to study earlier in order to get there? Which one came first, or do you really know?
I think studying earlier for me. Because when you study earlier, you have more time to think about your stuff. Because you should wait till like a day or two beforehand, and you study the material and try to learn everything, you can't really go in too deep because you got to cram all that material in at one point in time. As when you study earlier, you got time when you're not studying it because you're popping your head and say, why is this going on, or why is this happening? And that way, it already sunk into your brain, so your brain have enough time to actually process all the information you took in.
That's for me. I started to study earlier, and then that gave me the time to dig deeper, to see what was going on, instead of, like he said, instead of trying, 3 or 4 days, take all these concepts and, try to go as deep, and I would get stuff all jumbled up. Now I just, I started way earlier. Even the days that I didn't have nursing class, I was still in that book, reading, trying to figure out, okay, why is this happening? If there's something I didn't understand, I had time where I could go and research it, and then figure out to me it just seemed like it all just started meshing together, instead of waiting 2 or 3 days before a test and trying to cram all this in there.
Interesting. I appreciate you taking the time to kind of talk about your experience, and I want to ask you, so if peers from LR or from other institutions or educators sort of see this, how would you encourage them? What advice would you give them about the transforming good students into great learners, or using the diagram, or just the changes that can happen for you, we met for 1 hour, right? And you all participated in the 4-hour session, you by video and you in person. What would you say?
For nursing students, I'd recommend it. It's for the nursing students that are struggling, that just cannot get cannot just grasp a concept, because nursing school, the way the questions and stuff are asked are totally different than any test you're ever going to take. And for a nursing student, I'd highly recommend it. It's the best thing I've done.
You guys got any words of wisdom?
I guess since my major is science, like science students, any type of science, just the way you approach the stuff, don't try to memorize all the definitions, because once you get, it might work at some of the few of the lower levels, but once you get like in the 200, 300 levels, that the professors really don't care about definition no more. They really want you to know what comes after the definition. Like, it's good that you know the name, but why this happening, or what is this actually? And just don't be afraid to ask questions to your professors, because they there to help you. They might not be able to get to your question in class, but so just like to offer the hours, they'd be more willing to help. And that when you approach studying, don't wait till like a couple of days beforehand. Try at least like a week before. You don't have to do a lot, but just get in your head, and that way you can you do less studying at one point in time, so all that studying gets sink in, as well as you do a lot of studying at one time. It's all get mushed in there real quickly, and then if you're lucky enough, you get most of it. But you do it in smaller bursts, it sinks in there and stays in there longer.